Welcome to It's Not You, It's Grief, a safe space to have candid conversations surrounding the many faces of grief. How do you handle the process while moving forward and ultimately getting back to living in the moment? Come on this journey as we navigate grief through the art of storytelling. And now for your host, Ahira Smith.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 3. Yes, Season 3 premiere of It's Not You, It's Grief. I am Ahira Smith. It's been a long day, everybody. The Grief Mending Code. Thank you all so much for joining me again. I am so happy to have you all here. Right now, I know the weather's a little funky, especially here on the East Coast, so I hope everybody's taking care of themselves. I hope everybody's staying warm and safe. But you know what? I am just so thankful for each and every one of you supporting my podcast. It's been a very rewarding journey in being a host of this type of conversation, but it is much needed. And, right now I happen to be with a distinguished level of guest that I'm so proud and fortunate to be associated with, directly, indirectly, alumni, former colleague, and of course a member of a good organization that's constitutionally bound. Shout out to the Sigmas and Zetas. But yes, we're doing a Divine Nine special episode of It's Not You, It's Grief. And I really want to go ahead and get started and by introducing each one of my guests. First up, going to definitely reintroduce myself for those of you who are hearing me for the first time. My name is Ahira Smith. I am known as the Grief Mending Coach, and I am the podcast host of It's Not You, It's Grief. I happen to be a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and I am so honored to be here tonight with my fellow Divine Nine Greeks. Now, just to let you know, this is going to be part one of a series. I'm going to have another series with some other Divine Nine members. I just couldn't get them all on here at one time. So just to let everybody know that your representation is coming. But first off, let me go ahead and start with the ladies, because I know that's how I was raised. First up, I have on deck is one of the most sweetest, beautiful, intelligent sisters that I've had the pleasure of interacting and knowing for 7-8 years. We used to work together. And you know what? She has just been an inspiration for me. She's been a mentor for me in so many ways. And she also happens to be a member of a beautiful organization that my mother was affiliated with when she was with us here. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Mrs. Nikita Robbins Thompson of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Nikita, go ahead and give it out. Go ahead, shout it out.
Thank you. Well, listen, first of all, the introduction was the bomb, girl. I didn't realize I had that much impact in your life. So I'm just gonna say thank you for that, because you kind of opened my eyes to our relationship and the dynamics. But as you said, I am a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I became a member in spring of 2012, and it has been the best 12 going on 13 years of my life. I was just telling someone the other day that this time of year is so exciting because all of the Greek letter organizations are having their founders days and bringing in new members, and so it's a really exciting time, and it kind of humbles you around your own experience. Obviously we met at your former workplace. I still work there, but I currently serve as a director of graduate student support services there at the university, and I love working with students. You know that about me.
I do.
I'm a servant leader, and I love working with students, and so I've been doing that for a while now. But thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yes, y'all. She loves working with the kids. So God bless her. Bless her and the babies. Yes, yes, yes. So next up is a gentleman that I have the pleasure of being a part of my life indirectly. He just happens to be an alumni from the Kentucky State University, my alma mater. And he also happens to be a gentleman of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, which has a very special place in my heart because my father was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And on top of that, this gentleman came from the same chapter, Alpha Upsilon. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on stage Mr. Elliott Short. Hey, Elliott.
Evening. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well, brother. Doing well. So please tell everybody in my audience who you are, where you're representing, and just a little bit about what you do, which I know is so much, but we got some.
Originally from Chicago, Illinois, graduate of Kentucky State University, double major in criminal justice and business. Currently residing in Atlanta. Got to shout out to A, you know what I'm saying? And just living life, trying to help others. Currently, I am a site supervisor manager at QTS, which is a data center, the #1 data center growing in the United States right now. So happy to be a part of that. I'm also involved in the tax and finance industry as well. So tax season is upon us, a really busy time right now, but just glad to be able to come out and give my voice. Shout out to A-Ups, also Scandalous chapter at K-State.
Oh, Lord, here we go with the different nicknames of the chapters. Here we
Yeah,
go. But
yeah.
yes, absolutely. Elliott is definitely family for me twofold because again, we're both thoroughbreds, K-State, but because he also had a relationship with my father who is no longer with us. So,
He was my
family.
coach. He was my vocal coach.
Exactly. So he
Yeah.
got that voice. He got that voice. Trust me. Don't let he got that suave debonair voice. Don't let him fool you with all that proper English. He can smooth it out. He can smooth it
Got to
out.
keep it professional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much, Elliott. And so
Thanks for having me.
last but definitely not least is a gentleman that I had the pleasure of connecting on LinkedIn. Listen, everybody, make sure you check out LinkedIn because you talk about a network like no other. LinkedIn is the place to be. And so I just happened to meet this gentleman on LinkedIn and his profile, something that resonated with me so much. I'm like, I got to get in contact with this brother. And come to find out, he just happens to be my constitutionally bound brother of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Let me repeat that again. He is my brother, constitutionally bound, not no play cousin, not no play brother. He is constitutionally bound, my brother of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and he has been so instrumental in the military. This is a gentleman where I have nothing but the utmost respect for him and what he's done in helping our servicemen and women in terms of their own struggles regarding what their work that they do, both in the profession and also when they leave and they transition to become part of civilians. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my brother, constitutionally bound of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Mr. Lorenzo York. Brother York.
Thank you, Sarah Ahara. It's my honor and pleasure to be here, a part of your program. I am a native of Mobile, Alabama. Served 43 years in the Navy, 30 years in uniform as a Navy chaplain, and an additional 13 years as a civil servant working policy and professional development for Navy chaplains. I am a member of the Sigma Sigma alumni chapter of Montgomery County, Maryland, fall of 23. If you a graduate of Tulane University in 1976, when there were no Black Greeks on campus. Wow. So if you ask me what I've been doing all of my life, it's doing the work of Sigma, even before I was officially a member a year ago at this point in time. My connection of Sigma Sarah goes way back to the establishment of the first Black school for Black students in Alabama. It's called Mobile County Training School in Mobile, Alabama. And my most honorable founder, Leonard F. Morse, was the third principal, and they called him deans back then. And he was the one who established a foundation for higher education for Black students throughout the state of Alabama, but established Mobile County Training School as an intellectual learning ground for Black students in that area. So all I've done by wearing royal blue and pure white is come home officially, because growing up, the most influential men in my life were Sigmas. And when did I find out about that? When I gave some thought, reflected on it, did some work with history, and found out, because none of them beat a drum about being a Sigma. They were too busy just doing the work. So I am certainly humbled by being a part of the brotherhood and sisterhood of the royal blue and white. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining me on this discussion. It is a topic that is not easy for any one of us. And I just want to put a disclaimer out there that what we will be talking about is our own personal experiences involving grief and loss. It is not a reflection coming directly from each one of our organizations. So I'm putting that out there. This is not what Delta, Kappa, Zeta, Sigma. This is just our own personal experiences revolving grief and loss, and the lessons that we have learned from this experiences. Because let's be clear, none of us are immune from any type of grief and loss in this thing called life. None of us. You know, it doesn't matter if we became members in 2000s. It doesn't matter in the 2010s, or even as recent as last year or 23. We've all been through some grief, and we've all been through serious losses, especially the last 5 years. And what I want to do is to just kind of talk with you all, and just if you all would be kind enough to share with me and my audience on what lessons or what have you taken from these types of experiences, and how has it made you become the better person that you are today. So my first question is, here we go. I'm just trying to make sure I word it properly. So thinking at the time, like let's say the last 5 years, so it's 2025, and we all know when 2020 hit, it changed each and every one of us on this call. Was there a time where you felt such depth in terms of loss? Now, whether that's a loss of somebody who's passed away, whether it's a loss of a relationship, a job, even your own health in itself, or even, friendships. Has there been a time where the loss was so great for you, your grief was so deep, that you felt like you may have to pull away from the organization at any time?
I can start. So my mother had a health crisis. Well, yeah, and so I went into. I'm my mother's only child, and so there was a point through that experience that we were grieving, right? The information that was shared, and how we were going to move forward with it, right? And I think sometimes your life changes, especially when you talk about cancer. Your life changes, right? What used to be is no longer, and so you grieve that, right? You grieve being that comfortableness that you had before that diagnosis. And so I could say that during that time, not because my organization wouldn't have given me the support that I needed to get through it, I just needed, for me personally, to recalibrate, right? And so I found myself pulling away and kind of just kind of hyper focusing on being the daughter, right? And I went in work mode, right? And so I don't think that I was probably what I would say. I'm always striving to be the best Delta that I need to be, right? And so, you know, as we're in this, and we know this is a lifetime commitment, so that you're gonna have ebbs and flows in that, right? But I think there was a time where I had to kind of step away and just kind of hyper focus on my family, because our lives were changing with this new diagnosis, and we were having to grieve what happened, right? And then to start to embrace this new life. And that can be scary. And so it forced me to retreat. I'm coming on the other side of that thing too now. So, you know, my mom has been in out of active treatment since 2019. And, you know, her cancer has been at bay. So we would say we're in remission. And so I found myself now going back to the very thing that I pulled away from, getting a little bit more involved and active. But yeah, I think that required a little bit of my attention, and I needed to do that. And my sorors were very supportive, you know, checking in, and catching up, and trying to make sure I was okay, even when I was pushing away. So that's probably one most recent times where I felt like I had to do that.
Understood. And it's always good to hear that mom's doing well. Give your love, give my love to your mom. Mom's cool peoples. Elliott, what about you, brother?
Necessarily not that made me want to pull away. I just think that, you know, we all have to put everything in proper perspective when things happen in our lives. I wouldn't say pull away. I would just say maybe sometime you have to reprioritize what's important at that given time. So for me, there have been times where I've had to kind of restructure and prioritize, you know, where Kappa was sitting at in my priority list. For me, it's always God and family first, and then everything else afterwards. So I just try to keep those two at the top, and then if everything else has to be moved around, then that's kind of how I, you know, go about living my life. So yeah.
Good news. What about you, Brother York?
So I will, being a preacher, I will start by raising a portion of scripture here from Isaiah chapter 53, the second portion of the third verse. It's talking about Jesus, but the description that pretty much capsulizes this discussion. A man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. That was the description for Jesus. And that aptly applies to my life. I was 7 years old. My dad was 27 years old when he died in a car crash in Chicago. And his plans were to pick us up from Mobile for Christmas. Well, his body was shipped back to Mobile November 1961. So that dream never happened. But it was the beginning of my spiritual walk with the Lord. I didn't know it at the time. And about the time the church started teaching about prayer, I had blown every rule that they were talking about. I was blasting God. I was a seven-year-old kid using profanity to God. And basically, when you look at scripture, there's a section in Psalms that they call laments. And you recognize it when I describe it. Lord, my enemies are surrounding me. Bash their children's head in, make sure there are no teeth left. And it goes on and on. Those are the laments. But from the time I was 7 to 14, there was at least one relative, a close friend that died. And so my life started out pretty much being very much acquainted with grief and sorrow. I think what happened out of that experience is it shaped a preacher. My great-grandmother came to live with us, and she was my first spiritual director. And she assured me when I asked, was I going crazy? Because I was hearing voices, and she didn't overreact. She just asked me, tell me about the voice. And I told her how calm and powerful and assuring the voice was. And she said, baby, That's just the Lord just talking to you, reminding you that he's there. Why am I telling this story? My whole life, my 43 years in the Navy, I've been very much acquainted with grief, serving alongside shipmates. I say shipmates being sailors, but also Marines and those in all the services. For there are several assignments where all the services were serving under one commander, and day in, day out. And I want to thank you, Sarah, for back in November having Brother Owens on, an Army guy, an Alpha man, who was talking about his experience as a personnel specialist. When he talked about casualty calls, I was a chaplain going out with people like him. And it was their job to break the news. It was my job to stay with the family. Whatever they wanted, whatever they needed. I was the pastor in the moment. Military bringing this bad news. Somebody had to be there. They helped the family kind of sort of pick up the pieces. How do you pick up the pieces when you're looking forward to your loved one coming home in the next week or so, and you got these news with these two guys in your living room saying they're not coming home? But my point is, my whole professional life has been spent standing alongside those who were facing great tragedy in their lives and being a representation that there is hope. But more than that, walking them through the journey of what that 7-year-old Lorenzo York guy was going through, and blasting God with his own personal laments. Why did you take my dad? Why everybody has a dad. I'm lusting after the town drunk because at least he has children, but I'm not one of them. The short answer to your question about the depth of loss over the last 5 years, grief and loss is a constant companion for me, and the Lord has blessed me to grow richly. But I tell you, it's out of my whole experience, starting as a 7-year-old and spending time with my great-grandmother and my grandmother on the maternal side as mentors, that they shaped the preacher. God, I guarantee you, if it wasn't for that initial shock of that grief experience at 7 years old, I would not be a preacher. I'm surrounded by church women, and my promise to myself is, when I get old enough to make decisions for myself, I will not cast my shadow across a church door. And my point is, God certainly has a sense of humor.
We can't hear you, Hira.
I'm talking away. Good. See, that's how my director is. She be calling me out. That's all right. Former director. No, what I was saying was, first of all, I'm trying to keep my composure down, because each one of your stories, it resonates with me on so many different levels. Because, again, Brother York, you talk about how your journey that you recognize started at 7, where Nikita, around 2019, you're an only child of a great mom, and you try and take care of your moms. It's like the roles have reversed, because our parents are always been the one that's there to take care of us, and when your mother is dealing, or any parent is dealing with something that you're not familiar with or unused to, or just not expecting, it knocks the wind out of you. And in Elliott, again, you pointed out something that not too many people are brave enough to admit, that sometimes the organizations that we love and hold so dearly in our heart, it's got to take a step back, because life be lifing, and none of us are guaranteed a tomorrow. Some of us are not even guaranteed the next 2 hours, and it's just one of those things where there are some people who are in our lives that are there temporarily and to teach us. I mean, everybody comes with lessons. Everybody coming in our life is lessons. And, one thing that I really admire, and I want to say that it's probably safe to say that all of us have a very strong relationship with that grandmother, whether it was on your mama's side or your daddy's side, that always was like that figure. If mom and dad were always bickering or something, you had grandma, your Mimo, your Nana be like, hey, leave this baby alone, or hey, I got this child, or hey, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And so I think a lot of times the generations that are coming behind us are missing that. They're missing that person when grief is knocking on their door, or when the relationship has ended, or somebody came down with a diagnosis that they never thought they would ever hear. And so what I want to know is that, Brother York, you already mentioned it, but Elliott, when you've had to step in for someone else who was dealing with a grief of unmeasurable proportions, how did you handle it?
Oh, it depends on who the person was. I recently just dealt with two coworkers who lost. One of my coworkers and good friends, Markeisha, she found her brother dead on his front porch. And my friend, my coworker, Idris, saw his brother get murdered in front of his own eyes. He got shot to death. So I think for me, I think death has been so desensitized, especially I think around the time COVID came. People were dying so fast. It's just like you didn't have a chance to wrap your brain around each person who was passing. And then, as we spoke before here, the grief might not come to months later, a year later. I know for me, when my grandmother passed before I moved to Atlanta in 2021, really the grief really didn't hit me until about maybe sometime last year. And so it can come at different times, but I think we just need to be empathetic and to how people handle grief. Actually, yesterday I was just talking to my friend Mark about it, because it's starting to show in her performance. It's starting to show in her calling off all the time. And like 2 days ago, she just got up and left in the middle of the shift and didn't tell me, my other coworker. So I pulled her to the side yesterday. I said, hey, man, I know you're going through a lot of stuff. I'm like, but you can't push away the people who are willing to help you if you do not communicate. And so I think sometimes it's a communication issue. I think sometimes it's a coping mechanism issue. People know how to cope, haven't been taught to cope. I think sometimes it's just a matter of people don't know how to express because they haven't been taught or given a avenue or platform to be able to express themselves. They never had someone wrap their arms around them and tell them that they love them. They never had people to say, let me pray for you. They never had. So it's like they don't know. And what may be normal to some of us, because it seems like everyone on this panel has some sort of relationship with God. And I think that, when you're dealing with those who necessarily may not have, if not a relationship or as strong of a relationship as they would like to with God, I think it's imperative that we try to use our strength to stand in a gap for those people and to pray for those people, to kind of lift those people up, encourage those people. So I know I actually told my buddy Idris, I gave him my number. I pulled him to the side. I said, hey, man, I have a brother, man. And he's 7 years younger than me. And I wouldn't know what to do if I lost him in front of my face. I said, so here's my number. Give me a call. Let's get out, get some fresh air. And I think just trying to step up, and with me, just kind of trying to put myself in their shoes, even if you can't relate to what they're going through, at least just try to be somebody different, because I'm sure everyone's saying, my condolences, I'm sorry, this, that, and the third. But, I feel like everything's not always about financial and monetary, but just a small thing. So I bought him a card. I'm old school. I like cards. I buy people cards. So the look on his face when I gave him that card, he had on shade. He was wearing shades to work for like 2 weeks. He took them shades off, man. He actually gave me a hug. And he, my dad's name is Short. So he like, Big Short, man. I appreciate it, man. You know what I'm saying? But you can tell that he needed that, So I think just trying to observe people and see where maybe you can insert yourself to be a shining light for them or an example for them. I think that's the way. And also not desensitizing death, because I mean, me coming from Chicago, man, it's like it gets to a point where, you know, me and some of my friends used to say, hey man, you know, people die every day, you know what I'm saying? But it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be to where, you know, it's an afterthought. You know, every, you know, person matters, you know what I'm saying, no matter what the situation is. And I think we just need to take time to sort out and give grief its proper place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I'm so glad that you said that, because I will give my own example. The key to knows where I'm about to go with this. So after my dad passed away, I was literally in a state of apathy. I mean, I did not care. Nikita's smickering over there, but she could tell you, I did not care, Brother York. Everything that you were feeling at 7 years of age, brother, you take that to a woman who had her father in her life for 40 some odd years and he gone and I'm a daddy's girl. I did not care. And so Nikita, being a sweetheart, she'd bring me in her office. She would check on me, or like almost every other day, make sure I'm here, you know, and everybody felt it. They're like, hey, just give her some space, until one day Nikita had to literally pull me to the side in her office. And she said something that made me do a switch. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, I didn't care. But what she said to me, I'm not going to say it right now, but what she said to me made me perk up. I said, wait a minute, who are you talking to? I was like, excuse you? But it was at that moment, I was like, one, she was right. Yes, you were right. Two, it's recorded, so yeah, you'll have that for the rest of your time. But one, she was right. But two, that was when I started to realize that I had a relationship with grief I didn't even know existed. Because, you know, when people pass away, the first thing you thinking about, oh man, like you said, Elliott, my condolences, get that 3 to 5 day bereavement period, and then you're supposed to get back to work. Nah, son, it don't work like that. What you think is 3 or 5 days, I had 40 some odd years. The math don't math, you know? And so with that, I know it put her in a very tough position, because she knew what I was capable of doing, and yet she's never seen me like this. And she hasn't gone through it herself. And it was one of those things where I'm serious for a moment. I'm like, I may not be working here anymore. I might get security.
I was getting ready to say, I don't think you like me after that.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't. But I love you. I love you. But at that moment, I did not like you, because I did not want to hear it. And I wasn't ready to hear it. And that's when I started diving deep into it. And again, I had the love, you know, the blue and white family. I had other Greeks, K-State folks were coming, you know, giving their condolences, but I wasn't trying to hear it. I was just out. I checked out. And so with that though, it mattered. Like you said, it mattered. It mattered to York, when you are in that, when you're holding that space for people who are really dealing with the aftermath after all of the paperwork is done. It matters afterwards. Elliott, even though your colleagues are going through what they've witnessed and what they're bearing, it mattered that you held space. Nikita, it mattered when you held space for your moms, or for me, or anybody else who's gone through that. That my question about our relationship with grief started to evolve. It started to change. I started to dive a little deeper, because again, it was more than a 3-day bereavement and giving some cards out and be done with it. So my next question, because we've all been tested. Yes, sir.
Can I just add something to
Go ahead,
this conversation?
Sure.
Every experience of loss that we have demands a period of grief. We could deny it. We could try to shut it down. We could do whatever we think we can and should do about it, but it's going to happen. The question is whether or not we choose to embrace it in a way where we could receive the gifts of relationships from all angles. The interesting thing about the Bible's account of Job's friends, 3 friends coming to visit him, when they first came, they sat in silence with him. They messed up when they started talking and speculating about what's going on. Brother Elliott, when you were talking, what came to my mind was 3 powerful C's that help all of us, whether we are grieving or whether we're on the side of receiving support from loved ones, from friends, from sorrows that we may not want to hear what they have to say, but they're delivering what we need to hear. And that is, there's the choosing part. People choose in dealing with their grief what they do with it in terms of isolating or being open to receiving the gifts of relationships. Because there's some folk who know how to just sit with you. Because of my 7-year-old experience, I didn't learn it in any book, and I have a doctorate in counseling. I learned it through my own personal experience as a 7-year-old. I could sit with anyone in any pain that they're going through and respect whatever they choose for that dynamic to be. It's okay with me because I'm not going anywhere once I choose to be with them. The other C is connecting. Either we have it or we don't. And there's some friends and Sister Ahara, you pointed it out with Sister Nikki. There are some friends that could reach you no matter where you are and tell you what you need to hear instead of what you want to hear. And then love you enough to tell you, well, you go deal with it and I'm going to be here. So whenever you want to come back and you want to talk about it, then you can do that. That's the connecting piece. And the third piece is just communication. And Brother Elliott, you brought those 3 C's to me with what you had to say, but it underscores everything that we've been talking about. It really underscores the importance of you make some choices while you're dealing with your grief. You don't have to do it alone, but nobody could just wrestle you down and force you to receive the gifts of relationships, because there's some folk, no, they're not going to deliver a card. It works for you, Brother Elliott. For some, they don't want to hear anything. They don't want to receive anything. But you know what? If there is a relationship there, all you got to do is to just hang in there with them, even in their Wednesday worst, because the Sunday best is coming, but it's going to have to be a process. And the truth is, and I'll wrap up with this. When I started out talking about Jesus was described as a man quite acquainted with grief, I am so acquainted with grief that that's just a part of my rhythm and walking and living. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going around crying all the time, but it does mean that I have a sensitivity for folk in pain. You know, you meet folk and say, how you doing? And you know they're not doing well. And they say, I'm doing fine. Well, for me, that means I am arrested at that point. I cannot leave that person because I've seen enough to know that I got to, within the context of whatever our relationship is, to make a connection. And I think one of the most important things as a gift in the context of relationship is to make that connection, because all of us, when we're really hurting, when we're really grieving, we need to know that we're not by ourselves.
Agreed. Very much so.
Let me say this to her, and I'll be just to move on. Right?
Go ahead.
The thing is, I'm gonna say Pastor York's because I feel like we need the collection plate out with some of the stuff, the gems that he dropping, right? But what he's saying is so true, because think about our dynamic. That shifted our relationship. That moment with the death of your father, and how it all kind of came out, and how I had left work and somebody came and helped, all those things really, and it wasn't until he started talking really shifted and shaped our relationship. It changed it, where we were not only co-workers and colleagues, but we went on this path of like this journey, right? And I thought about it when he was talking about it. I was like, wow, how in that moment when I was making you mad, because honey, she was mad with me, and she told me later.
like 3 years later, I told her.
I'm mad with you. I was like, oh, okay, great. And I didn't even realize I was sticking and staying in a situation, but God, saw fit to have me stay there, right? And as a result, our relationship has grown into so much more. But I think about it now. I was just, your supervisor, and the dynamics that was going on there. And it was just like how, wow, that shifted and shaped our relationship for what we had today.
Absolutely. Because when Dad died in 2018, and like you said, when things happened with your mom, it shifted. I'm like, all right, I'm mad at her, but that's for the side. Let me hold space for her and everything she's going through. Let me get that card going. Hey, everybody sign this card. Get the pen, get the card, get some flowers for her, because she's going through it, because again, I'm fortunate enough. So I had siblings. I have 2 older brothers, and we all dealt with the passing of our dad at the time differently. But I had siblings. She's an only child, and I'm like, look, I'm gonna be here for her. She was there for me in a weird kind of funky Nikita way, but I love her. But I'm gonna be there for her and make sure we just ease up on her. And so one of the things which leads me to this is, what did you learn from grief? Go ahead, Elliott. Take it.
I think, and this kind of just, I guess this will close out what we just were talking about. I think one thing it taught me is you may not know necessarily why you are somewhere until after you get there and you realize that you're not there for why you think you're there, but you're there for what God wants you to be there for. And I think that was a real big, important lesson for me, because at this time, I'm sitting here like, why am I even at this job? You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be here. This is not where I'm trying to be. This is just a pit stop. God, why am I here? You know what I'm saying? And then, in hindsight, I think for me anyway, God always speaks to me in hindsight. So it's like it has to be after the fact. And then I'll be sitting down just drinking a cup of water or chilling or watching some TV. And then God would download in my brain, like, that's why you was there. This is why I got. And I'll be like, where did that come from? So I think that's one big lesson for me specifically, individually, is sometimes God puts you in places not for the situation, but for the people that's there. So that's one big lesson that I've learned about grief. And there's other lessons, but I'll let everyone else speak.
Nikita, what did you learn from it?
Well, I would say that, and I think Pastor York had said earlier, that I think Elliott said this too. There it's ebbs and flows, right? You might be in work mode right now, and then you'll have a moment to yourself, and you're like, wow, like 4 months later you're grieving, or a song will come up, and or you hear something, or somebody will say something. So what I am learning is grief is it's not definitive, right? It doesn't begin and end at a certain time. It could be very much ongoing, and it gets easier. I do believe that. I don't think it gets harder. I do believe that it gets easier, but I believe that you have your ebbs and flows with it, right? And that it's not that black and white. It could be very fluid. And I think you even shared that with me when we were having conversation. And like, it could be very up and down. It could be you today you figure you got it all together, and tomorrow you're like, I'm a ball of puddles, and like, why? What's going on? And to be okay with that and find a way to embrace that, because maybe in that moment you need to sit with that, right? And then figure out how to get past it so that you can then move on. And so although I haven't, I guess I would say blessed that I haven't had a lot of close people pass. Like, I've been blessed to still have my mother, blessed to still have my father. I've lost grandparents and things like that. But and obviously, those have impact. But the loss of friendships or relationship or job or things of that nature, like I said, the health situation with my mother, grieving what used to be and what's now, and some other dynamics, it has definitely had its impact. And obviously it has its ebbs and flows. So I'll park it right there, but I think that's the lessons that I've learned with grief, one of them.
Sister Nikki, the ebb and flow that you're talking about and that you recognize in what Brother Elliott was saying and things that I said, it reminds me of the psalmist declaring, Lord, is good that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. And the truth of my experience is walking in the cadence of learning the Lord's statutes, because pain has a way of grabbing our attention. And there is no pain like grief. And what it has done for me is it has caused me to be situationally aware of things where if I had not experienced what I experienced at 7 years old, I'd be clueless about a whole lot of things about myself and about other people. And I'll just mention this. In this moment, I am going through anticipatory grief. It's been going on for 15 years now. My mom has dementia. And when things started happening and I started noticing changes, I started having conversations with her. That was my way of saying goodbye in terms of a time release kind of evolution. And if the Lord blesses, 20 March comes, she will be 90 years old. But my mom today, you back it up, 15 years is just totally different. Now, here's my challenge. It's my anticipatory grief. I've been working on it for 15 years, but it's because of all the other life experiences that I alluded to. For my brother and my sister, they are so much in denial. And the Lord had to tell me to slow my roll. They are wherever they need to be at the moment, because just some things. I gave them a great book to read with the lady who experienced this with her mom. You know what they did? They put that book aside. Thanks, bruh. They put the book aside. They have no intention of reading the book. If they read the book, they would know that you cannot get upset with mom, because 15 minutes after being glad to see you, she asks you, are you married? Do you have any children? It's all in the book, but they don't want to read the book. And I can't read the book. So I got patience with that. I'm pretty much satisfied in my relationship with my mom, because I've said everything I needed to say over the last 15 years. And she certainly said everything she needed to say to me. My mom is the kind of person where she is not bashful. You don't have to wonder what she's thinking. So, but my point is that there are gifts, and this is what I hear you're alluding to in the question, Sister Howard. There are gifts that comes along with the pain of what we experience with loss, with anticipatory loss, or with the complications that we have to deal with, because life keeps happening and we got to do what we have to do. And I'll say this to just make a point and underscore it. And a part of what we need to do as we deal with grief and the impact is we gotta not talk about it. We have to practice self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, each and every one of you has hit it on the nose. And I know for me, when I was definitely in the thick of things of losing both my mom and my dad almost two years apart from each other, the one lesson that was really painful for me was I tell people this in a joking manner, but I'm so serious. It's like if you ever really want to know a person's true character, let a death occur. You see
Mm-hmm.
all types of stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you don't be thinking about. There was
Mm-hmm.
a time when my mom had passed away, and there was this person who I was talking to. That person maybe reached out to me one time and then ghosted me for like the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm like, really? You ain't checking up on me? You ain't giving me a call, text, nothing? I'm like, I noted, and it was something that even then I was like still making up excuses. And I think we all know what excuses are as to why they did what they did, because they just don't know how to talk, or they just uncomfortable. But like you said, Elliott, that thing called empathy is so missing nowadays that it's just so unreal. And honestly, just to kind of switch it to a current event situation, I know you all have saw that whole situation with the TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing when TikTok shut down, people
Mm-hmm.
were going off, just
Yeah,
frantic.
crazy.
And I'll be honest with you, even though it supposedly have come back, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of scared. Not because I had TikTok, but I was like, some of these people's lives were so intertwined with that TikTok that I did not want to read a hashtag or somebody decided to take matters in their own hands by taking their life to an end because TikTok was no longer there. And I was like, they are grieving, and
Mm-hmm.
even though it's like, oh, my TikTok is back, they had a period of grief that was just
Mm-hmm.
earth shattering. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what is going on in this world to where we are so consumed with everything else that is not organic,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where somebody says, if I cut the light off in this room, you know, we still searching, but it was so frantic. I mean, people were
Mm-hmm.
making little memes or little posts
Mm-hmm.
about having funerals for TikTok, and I'm like, oh, now that
Mm-hmm.
it's coming back on, what, we're doing a resurrection program? What is this? What is this? I was serious. I put it on. We have it. Who's singing the hymnal for resurrection? Because the only resurrection I'm familiar with is one, but that's just me. But like you said, brother York, you're dealing with anticipatory grief. Elliott, you shared that your colleagues, one in particular, is dealing with that trauma grief, the loss of seeing his brother being murdered in front of him. You know, um, Nikita, you were dealing with the anticipatory grief hard, and you were doing compound grief because you were trying to navigate through the ebbs and flows of what was happening in our work spot. So each and every one of us was dealing with some type of grief, and we had learned the lessons that came from them. And 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 to an extent, we're still learning those lessons. We're still learning them. Um we're still keenly aware that this is just part of the journey. And so I know our time is running down, but I'm just curious if there was one or two piece of advice to people who are struggling with their grief, especially for the men. Brother, listen. I mean, I can. Me and Nikita, we we sisters, and dealing with the fellas in different ways, daddies, brothers, sons, and all that stuff. But I'm telling you, the fellas, we need y'all just as much as part of your healing as y'all need us. And so what I want to ask each and every one of you, if there was one or two pieces of advice for people who are struggling with whatever type of grief that they are dealing with or they're about to come upon, what would it be?
I'll go first. I've mentioned it and I'll say it again in response to the conversation that Elliott got us right on Main Street. And I mentioned the 3 C's, choice and connection and communication. Choice, people choose to be unhappy or whatever feeling they want to claim. Because this thing about you hurt my feelings. If you give me the power to do that, and I inadvertently did something, and now you're all upset, I got more power than I ever thought I had. But people can choose what state of mind they want to be in, and it's important to remind everyone that you can exercise your choice anytime you get ready with any life circumstance. Connection. It's important to affirm the people who are important to you. Within our organizations, there's a relationship that we have. But within that context of relationship, there's a saying, I don't think is unique to Sigma men, but we talk about SPECH, which means those brothers who are going through the process of coming out on the other side, that they just hit you hard in such a way where you just have a special interest in them in receiving all the gift of what it means to be a part of the organization. But connection also means that there are some folk that for whatever reason, y'all don't have nothing in common, and yet they're sticking to you like glue, and all of that is wonderful. Just recently, talking about grief again, my first C dad has transitioned to be with the Lord. And I'm glad I got a chance a few years ago to spend time with him in Las Vegas. But that connection was always there. And you looked at us, it was like Mud and Jeff. What is he doing hanging out with the chaplain, or the chaplain hanging out with him? And in addition to connection, the third thing is communication. I'm no mind reader, and I tell people all the time in the context of all the relationships I have, and whatever it is you need to tell me, you don't need a preamble. Just tell me. If you think it's something that's going to hurt my feelings, that's fine. Just tell me, because once you tell me, you're not beating around the bush, we can get to the heart of the matter. But the communication part rests solely with the person who's hurting. I have no idea you're hurting unless you tell me. Now, I'm the guy who just said I got a sensitivity where I picked that up. That's true. But you know what? I could be way off in left field. You got to tell me. So the 3 things that I will offer is know that you have a choice, and there's power in that, and appreciate the connections that you have or that you experience other folk have with you, and you wonder why they're sticking to you like glue. And the third thing is just communicate. If something's going on feeling wise, just let folk who are important to you know, because you don't have to go through anything by yourself.
I'll start to next. I think if I had to offer, I heard someone say self-care earlier, and giving yourself permission to celebrate yourself in that way, right? I know as women, sometimes we don't always, at least I'm that superwoman, right? And I got to take care of this person and take care of that person, and my mom and my husband and my son and everybody, sorority stuff. And sometimes it's okay to just take care of you, right? And not feel guilty about that. I think it's important to offer that, make it a commitment. It's a part, just like going to the gym and talking to a therapist and going to the doctor. Those things are important. So as I say it to you, I say it to myself. Self-care is important, right? And then giving people permission to be vulnerable. I think a lot of times, even society, and I think we give people 3 days for bereavement, and then you expect them to come right back in and jump in and be, the same way they were before. And the reality is they're not. Just like Ahira said, I have 40 years with this person. You think I'm gonna take 3 days and everything's gonna be better? So giving people the permission to be vulnerable and to not be their best selves, and as leaders and directors and people in those roles, being compassionate enough in that to know that, hey, I can pull you up, but at sometimes I might have to just say, let that person be, right, and allow them to do what they're doing, and then giving, like I said, giving yourself permission to be vulnerable. I think sometimes, again, as men and women who lead and do all these things, it's hard to say I need help, or to lean into people, as opposed to retreating. I know, like I said earlier, I'm a retreater, but this go around, I say, you know what, when some things was happening, instead of me retreating, I'm gonna push in. So yeah, I'm going on that lunch date. Yeah, I'm going to sorority meeting. Yeah, all the stuff that I would have normally say, I don't feel like doing, I'm just not gonna do it. No, that's when you need to lean in. That's when you need to stay involved. And so those are the things that I would offer to people through this process.
I'm gonna piggyback off you, Miss Nikki. I think my thing would be communication, not isolation. You like you said, get around your family, your community. The devil works on our mind when we, our mind is devil's playground when it's idle. So when you by yourself, or I would tell people, if you are by yourself, talk to God. My relationship with God has gotten to the point where I'm trying to form more of a realistic father-son relationship. Not like, have reverence, but talk to him like just what's on my mind. Like I tell people that I think that's what kind of got my breakthrough a lot. And I was like, man, I just need to talk to him like I'm talking to my mom or my dad, and I think that sometimes that, along with listening to some sermons or cutting on some inspirational or gospel music or whatever you have, even if it's music with no words, just that, get in that mode, get in that mindset. If you can't get around community, that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is, I'm more of a and everybody's not like this, but I'm more of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, keep going. Let's persevere. Reverend Miles Monroe says something that always sticks with me. He says, if you live life casually, you will end up a casualty. And I think that, sometimes, like you said here, like when you have that, I don't care, I don't, that attitude is okay during the grieving process, but we can't let that attitude persist and dwell, and change who you are as a person. Like, I know people who death have changed them. They are not the same person, man, that they was, because it's like they haven't been able to pick themselves back up. No matter if they're around community, people, it's nothing you can say to them to get them picked up. So I would say, you can't let tragedy change who you are and turn you into something that you are not destined to be. And so I would say, look at, like what Miss Nikki say, choose the times that you had with them, the fun times, the things that you remember about them. When my grandmother died, my grandmother was a tough cookie. So it's like, at the end of the day, sometimes when I'm going through stuff, I'll be like, you know what? She would be like, come on, boy, you better tighten up. You better get it together. And I'd be thinking like, you know what? She's not here. But if I would call her right now, I know this is what she said, because you are in tune with that person who you once had in your life. So that's kind of like some of the advice that I would give. Stay close to God, stay close to your community. Don't isolate yourself, and grieve, but don't let it turn into a 20, 30, 40-year thing where you can't help others, because people don't know your testimony going to help other people. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing I've learned. That's another thing that I've learned about grief is what I'm going through is a testimony that I can share with somebody else to help them get through what they're going through. I don't have to be a therapist or anything like that, or a counselor, and no offense to anyone that's in those fields, but you know, you don't have to be that. You could just be someone that God puts in place at that time to be able to impact that person.
Well said. Well said. Well, I don't have to say anything else after that other than thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Brother York. Shoot, I feel like I had church this evening with y'all three on here. I didn't know. I got a collection plate somewhere, so somebody
Brother
want to,
York got us started. He got us
he got
started.
me. We're gonna do a collection plate later,
Oh
but
yeah. When he pulled out the
honestly,
word, he got us on the right track. Yeah.
right, he did. You know, it's always good to have that word. It's always good to have that
Mhm.
word from the source. But honestly, all three of you, thank you so much for this conversation and just sharing a glimpse of your own journey dealing with grief and loss. You know, we're four educated uh people of different wonderful, beautiful divine line organizations, and each and every one of us have experienced a lot on this journey called life. But you know, we're able to come together regardless of the colors, regardless of the letters, regardless of how long we've been affiliated with our organizations, to talk about something that knows none of that, that doesn't even think about any of that. It's just part of the journey. And so one of the things I definitely want to say is for anybody who is struggling, to again remember what you were able to pick up here, you know, connect, choice, communicate, you know, make sure you are understanding that this is just part of the journey, that you don't want to have your moment, be vulnerable, but don't stay in that idle position, because again, the devil can play with you like that, or those that mean harm can do harm. You know, just know that there are people and support out there. You know, all you have to do is just seek, you know, and it's there. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the grief journey, I'm doing a grief workshop on January 22nd, starting January 22nd for 4 weeks for an hour. So if anybody would like to get some information about that, please go to eventbrite.com, more information about it. You know, we'll talk about that anticipatory grief that Brother Lorenzo talked about. We'll talk about that compound, that complex, and you know what, just to teach everybody and also help in our own healing, you know, strategies and tips, because trust me, grief is a roller coaster ride. Grief has no blueprint. It's not about getting around it, get underneath it, get over it. You have to go through it, and eventually we will get to the other side in a manner that actually takes brave people to face. It takes bravery. It really does. Because trust
Mhm.
me, that I'm telling you, Nikita doesn't realize this. I'm putting her on the spot. She planted something in me where I think had she not had that conversation with me, I probably would not be where I am. I'll be honest with you, because that was a poignant moment for me. I'm like, wait a minute. She bringing my daddy in this conversation in a whole nother level. I don't like this. But that's how my dad was. Elliott knows my dad. So my dad was not for
For
play.
real.
You know,
He was now he
that
was a
was
beast.
that was Deacon Smith. Trust me, Lorenzo, you and him would have gone toe to toe. I mean, not in a bad manner or anything, but yeah, listen, my father about those scriptures, bruh.
He,
He
yeah,
will
yeah.
literally he will literally stop his voice lesson and bring
Yeah,
scripture
yeah,
all up in
he
there.
will. He will. I'm a witness to that. I'm definitely a witness to that. I'm gonna say something real funny about your dad, man. So
Go
like,
ahead.
yeah, because like people don't understand, like they could be around a living legend and not even know it, man. Like we were sitting there, and I remember one day my buddy, man, and I'm gonna be transparent. So our classmates came into class high, and we were singing and doing this, and your father just stopped and he said, "Hold on, man." He said, "You gotta stay off that stuff, man." And then it just went on for 10 minutes about life, about like that, man, them drugs are terrible and blah blah blah, and that's why you can't sing right, and it's an affecting your voice, and it's affecting your diaphragm and your breathing, and you breathing that stuff, and like everybody was sitting there like. And then I remember, and me and another one of our buddy, we was laughing, and then after class, I remember we was like, man, let's do some research on Dr. Smith. Let's see what, cause you know what I'm saying. And we looked at his background. And I never, to this day, I remember my boy Darren said, man, he the black paparazzi, man. This man got all type of accolades and awards from France and Germany. I was like, for real? And we doing, that's what that's when Google was hot. So we like, man, let's Google and see all the stuff he done and all the plays he been in and stuff. And man, like we came back to class the next day, like, sir, yes, sir. Cause it was just that respect, and then, that's one thing I love about HBCUs. Like a lot of the teachers are going to be like father figures for real. Like a lot of those, they going to keep you in line for sure. So that's just a funny story anecdote I wanted to share. But yeah, after that, it's like the respect level went up. And then it's like to those who listen, it's like, you know what? I'm going to take what he say. I'm gonna apply whatever he's saying to try to make my life better, because his life was on a whole nother level. And the thing I loved about your dad, he never bragged about none of the stuff he did. Like if you didn't come in his office or you didn't have any personal conversations with him, you wouldn't have even known that he was the larger than life figure. But if you go outside or you go in the music world or you go in the concert or the classical singing world, it's like he was a super. It's like walking around with Prince or Michael Jackson. You like, man, everybody want to take this man picture, want to sign autographs, and they find out who he is. So yeah, man, like, yeah, for sure. Your father was that dude, for real.
Thank you. Yeah, he, again, I'm very humbled, and thank you so much for remembering my father like that. So really quick, if he was like that with you, do you know what it was like for us in that house?
Yeah, I already know. I can imagine.
Listen, no disrespect for any other person of a believer of a faith, but let me tell you something, and my brothers can vouch for this. The Jehovah's Witnesses, when they be making those Saturday trips, man, let me tell you something. They knock on that door. They pray that my dad's not behind that door. Because, when a Jehovah's Witness comes in to talk, they'll be in there for about a good half hour, maybe 45 minutes. My dad will keep them there for 2.5 hours. Like, Mr. Smith, we gotta go. And he's like, no, you don't. Hey, bring some more coffee over here. I was just like, Dad, we gotta go. We got a game to go through. Abram's playing. We gotta go. He's like, come on back next Saturday. And it's like, it will be like, they'll switch out every 6 weeks, like 6 weeks. They'll have 2 new people for like 6 weeks in a row, because they don't even give them a warning. They're like, hey, go to that house right there and see what you can do. And they'll be coming out all shook, like, what the world? What? I was just like, we tried to tell you. I said, don't do this, but that's in here that we get off topic. But listen, I learned a lot from each and every one of you. Even talking about my dad, I'm still learning a lot from his passing, but the lessons are so rich in my healing, and just being able to make the connections that I have with each and every one of you. So again, I thank everybody who just sat on this conversation with me. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this. I look forward to talking to each and every one of you. And trust me, we might do another roundtable, because I know we are, because I have to get a couple of other different Divine Nine organizations on here, because my phone's been blowing up. I'm like, where are we at? And I'm like, well, y'all didn't answer the call the first time. So I'm not saying anybody in particular, Alpha, aka G, Rho, Iota, Q, but I digress. Y'all, come on, and then we'll have a real good meal. But again, for everybody who is on here, thank you so much for listening to our conversation. I hope you picked up something that we were putting down. And again, the support is definitely there. Definitely check us out. Each and every one of us are doing our own endeavors. Nikita's got her Trunks of Love Foundation nonprofit organization. Check out my brother Elliott Short down there. My thoroughbred. He's doing taxes, so you're gonna get that money. Hey, he's up to date. Don't let him fool you. And then you got my constitutionally bound brother, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, Lorenzo York, who's just been so wonderful in helping the families in the military regarding their own journey of transition. So, definitely check us out on our different platforms, IG, Facebook, LinkedIn. Connect with us so we can continue to support each other. TikTok. So the repass for the TikTok will be held at Elliott's spot.
Hey, we're gonna have fried chicken and potato salad. We lit.
Okay, who's making the potato salad? Because you know that is a question. Everybody,
Somebody's Mima, somebody's Nana making it. That's all I know.
okay, as long, all right.
Somebody Nana making it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
With the
okay.
heavy hand, with the heavy
With
hair.
the heavy
With the heavy
hand,
hair.
okay, so
Yeah,
you know they got
yeah.
that wrist action because you know it's all about the
Here's
wrist.
action.
It's all about the wrist. So as long as nobody's having a flashback about that risk.
Oh man.
This is what we do. We got to end on a light note, but everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you all had a good evening. Everybody, take care, enjoy yourself, and we will see you on the next episode of It's Not You, It's Grief. Stay well, stay hydrated. Just, you know, we love you, and we cannot wait to see you again. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening, being intentional, and sharing this moment with us. We at It's Not You, It's Grief deeply understand the many facets of grieving, and we want to make sure we can be here for you. Again, thank you for listening, and tune in again wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We look forward to seeing you next time. Be well.